Welcome back to Dirty Hands, Dirty Mouth, Episode 6, Get Back in the Kitchen.
I'm Juicy, and I'll be your dirty hands today.
And today I'm going to be your dirty mouth. I am Boomer.
Hi, Boomer.
How's it going, Juicy?
Pretty good. What are we talking about today, man?
It seems that we don't have a special guest, so I think we're going to talk a little bit with Ragin about some of the stuff that he's been doing. And he's got some pictures for us to go through, and maybe we can learn something. What do we have here?
I feel all special.
Hi, Jeff.
Yeah, you should. We have some beautiful things to talk about, to be honest with you. Some things that are a little bit off with the offcuts, being the heart, the liver, the tongue, and maybe we can start with the trip. What is TRIPE? Trip? Am I saying that right?
Tripe is what you're talking right now. There's nothing beautiful about offcuts, dude.
Nothing beautiful.
Tripe is actually the lining of a cow's stomach, and so a cow's got 4 different stomachs, and honeycomb tripe tends to be the most preferred tripe, and you can get it at Asian supermarkets, and the rare butcher shop will sell it. Most places don't because nobody wants it. But if you've ever been to like a Chinese restaurant and you've had, say, one of their more exotic soups, or like you've gone to a Vietnamese place and you've had some of their pho, if you see some white stuff, like kind of white jiggly stuff, kind of looks like a honeycomb, that's tripe. And you have to cook the shit out of it, or it's just some rubbery mess. Once you really, really cook it up, it gets pretty tender, and it's actually not too bad. I kind of like tripe if it's cooked well.
Is it a specific ethnicity thing? Or is it just...
No. Tripe goes a long way back. The British had it, the French had it, and of course the Asians have a lot of it because they eat pretty much anything. You can trace it back to almost any cuisine that works with livestock. They'll have eaten tripe back in the day. It's just something that's fallen out of favor because it's all white and rubbery and gross, and of course the kids don't want to eat it. But it is actually quite good if you learn how to cook it.
Kind of reminds me of calamari. I've never cooked it, but I know I've eaten it.
It is a similar appearance and texture to squid. It's quite similar. It looks like a squid tube, just with kind of a ripple pattern to it.
How about cooking? Is it prepared somewhere similar? Like with squid, you don't want it to be too fast, or you want it to be hot, but you want it to be fast. You don't want to keep the calamari in the deep fryer for a long period of time, or else it gets rubbery, right?
Yeah, with squid, it's an either or. So either you barely cook it at all, or you cook it a long time, like a low, slow braise or something. Otherwise, it's rubber. With tripe, there's no either or. You have to simmer the crap out of it until it's tender. It takes at least a couple hours to tender up.
If I'm recalling... Sorry, go on, Juicy.
No, I was going to ask, it's predominantly used for making broth, is it not?
Yeah. It tends to feature in soups as a type of garnish, and if you know anything about soup theory, you know that everything in a soup's a garnish. So it tends to be one of those ingredients that you'll find in a soup. But you could find it in other places, like some Asian places will throw it on a sandwich or something.
Well, that actually is what I thought it was to begin with. It was a type of soup, but then when I seen it in the list with heart, liver, and tongue, it just got me curious to what it actually was. But that's
Tripe is an offcut, and we actually had a dish in culinary school that was it was a tripe dish with a calvados sauce. A calvados is a French apple brandy, and I actually thought it was really nice. A lot of people in the class were like, "Ew, gross, it's tripe." But yeah, if you cook tripe well and you serve it with a nice sauce or something, you can make something good.
Seeing pictures here on the internet, and it looks almost like it's a vast but like it's insane how many pictures are different. I don't know what to say. Call that. Fucking having a stoner moment here. Everything from white, brown, red,
White. Tripe is white.
Creole, Mexican, Caribbean, Russian. So yeah, wow. Fried tripe.
It's a sponge. It'll absorb whatever you cook it in.
Looks fascinating, to be honest with you. I never heard of it before. I'm surprised.
It's one of those byproducts that if you go to, say, an Asian market, it's actually expensive. Like, you're looking at probably like anywhere from 12 to 14 bucks a kilo for tripe, which is ridiculous because it's a byproduct. But if you were to probably go to your local butcher, I bet you could get a good deal on it.
Yeah, you could see why I like that butcher, hey?
Yeah,
It's pretty good.
Boomer's Local Butcher is one of those full-service butcher shops that slaughters and butchers, so they have all the organs and all the fun stuff, and they can sell them for cheap.
It's also majority of his own beef. He
Yeah, which
does all
is
the
great.
raising.
That's really rare. Do you want to move on to the next offcut? You got one you want to talk about next?
Juicy, do you want to learn anything about heart, liver, or tongue? As far as I know, I don't know anything, so we could talk about it for quite a while because I don't know anything about all of it.
Yeah, I actually, because I usually get a side of beef, and last year actually, we got two sides of beef, and I didn't get any organs. I just got bones and meat. So it would be interesting to know what organs I could potentially be putting in my freezer next year.
Well, the typical organs that you can work with would be your heart, your liver, and your kidney. Other cuisines will use the other organs like the lungs, and then you can get into stuff like sweetbreads. Although sweetbreads, that's more of a fine dining thing. There's a fair amount of preparation involved. Yeah, if you look at something like haggis, which is a Scottish delicacy at this point. I mean, it used to be pretty commonplace. Haggis is pretty much like a big meat pillow where you take minced lamb with some, I believe, some cooked off rolled oats, and you throw in some chopped sheep's lung, sheep's liver, sheep's heart, pretty much all the offcuts, and then it's all placed inside of a sheep's stomach and then tied off and cooked, and it just has a wonderful flavor because the organs will just give you so much flavor, just rich flavor. But that's more of an extreme example. For everyday cooking, you're probably just looking at, again, heart, liver, and maybe some kidney. Kidney's a little tough to work with, and you could even get into stuff like brains, but that's a little messy, and you can make people sick if you're not careful. That's something people used to do back in the day, but not really anymore.
It's a messy pudding, a messy meat pudding.
I guess we'll go into liver then, because it's the most commonplace of the offcuts, and a lot of people grew up on liver and onions, and it's something that's easy enough to prepare. But the problem, and we actually discussed this last episode with Nugs, is most liver you find, say, in the supermarkets is just shit quality, because the liver is sort of a receptacle for everything that you feed the animal. So if you're feeding the animal shit and you're treating it like shit, the liver's going to taste like shit. So people nowadays tend to associate liver with that sort of gross smell. It just smells off when you get it. But I bought a big offcut pack from Boomer's Local Butcher, and I actually prepared some of the liver last night, and it was wonderful. It had just this mild flavor to it. It was really clean tasting, and it just kind of had a liver texture, but otherwise, it barely even tasted like liver. And all I did was I just took the liver and I sliced it like a thin steak or a cutlet. I don't know if you know what cutlets are.
Smaller, like, portions is what I was thought.
Well, a cutlet is closer to, if you think of schnitzel, it's kind of that thickness, maybe a little thicker. you tend to take a smaller portion of meat and pound it out with a meat hammer or something until it's flat, and then for a cutlet you would typically just bread it and then fry it up in a pan, which is what I did with the liver. I just sliced it thin, and then I took out all the membranes I could find, and then I just coated it in flour, just some seasoned flour, and then a little bit of beaten egg on there, and then just some breadcrumbs, and then I just pan fried it in olive oil till it was medium rare. Probably should have used butter. My butter was in the freezer, and I served that with some caramelized leeks. I mean, typically people do caramelized onions, but I didn't have any onions, and I threw some raspberry vinegar on top, and it was quite nice. I really enjoyed it.
It's good to hear somebody actually enjoying liver besides myself. I've only had good liver from my aunt and my mom, and I wish I could have got the recipe from them while they were here, because I strongly do not like store-bought liver. It
really is terrible. And liver, you need to, if it's more of a mild liver like the one I bought, you need to give it some flavor. So cooking in butter is a good idea, and then hitting it with some vinegar, a strong vinegar like a balsamic malt vinegar or raspberry vinegar really does numbers for it. It'll just pick the flavor up.
That
The lady that
go on, Juicy.
the lady that I buy the beef from, she had offered if I wanted any of the liver, and I said I didn't know how to cook it. But that for her is like her favorite part of the whole cow. Every year when she slaughters her beef, her prized possession or her prized cuts are the livers. I asked her if maybe next year she'd teach me. So maybe in the spring I can talk to her about that a little bit more, and of course maybe I'll learn some more here today too.
So yeah, I'm surprised you don't know how to cook liver, Juicy, because it's something that older folk definitely grew up on. Liver and onions. You talk to them, they know all about it.
But most people just put flour on it, chopped up some onions, fried it, and that's it. It's dried out. Picking the membranes out, I never thought of doing that. That take the chewy parts of it out.
Yeah, well, it's the same with any other meat, right? You're taking the silver skin and the tendons out.
Yeah. You're not leaving it in the hole, though, cutting it into its little cutlets. You get I can see where you're going with that.
Yeah, so I mean, the procedure with meats, if you want to cut it into thin slices, is, if you've got like kind of a fist shaped cut of meat, you'll butterfly it. So you'll cut it about 90% of the way in half, just with a vertical slice, or not a horizontal slice, excuse me, and you'll open it up like a butterfly, and then it'll flatten out, and then maybe you'll have to cut it up again, who knows, but basically that's the procedure. And you just want to get it nice and flat. You could even pound it with like a meat hammer between a couple sheets of plastic wrap if you wanted to get it even thinner. And yeah, I mean, there isn't that much to it.
There's a lot of different pâtés and stuff like that you can make with it, and
yeah, liver is one of those ingredients.
You don't even know.
Liver is one of those ingredients you'll find in a lot of old world cuisines. It was often an additive for sausage, or I mean, maybe a more canonical example would be stuffing for turkey at Thanksgiving. The giblets, your liver, your heart, like your gizzards will all get chopped up and then cooked in with the gravy or something to give it more flavor. It's a hearty, meaty flavor that comes with it. But in the case of sausage, like you can find sausages that are predominantly liver, like the Germans have liverwurst. I'm sure there's some others I'm forgetting, and of course the French do a pâté as well with
the
liver.
mocked chopped liver, and you have that that would be good on like toasted sourdough bread.
Yeah, chopped liver comes from Jewish cuisine. That's a little different. They're a little weird. They really like cooking things in chicken fat and other animal fats.
Yeah, it's like I don't actually know where the heritage with that beef from, but the mocked chopped liver, where it's like almost like a tuna spread, but it's liver, and it's
That's
just like
Jewish
spreading.
cuisine. That's
That is
yeah,
Jewish, eh?
Yeah, chopped liver comes from the Jews.
Ah, that's different. There's so many different things that you can actually do with liver that people don't really know about. I have heard of liver. Oh God, what are they called? Little round balls. Usually see them on the dumplings. Liver dumplings.
Yeah, could be.
Liver. Yeah, liver dumplings with soup.
I believe
I
it.
don't know where that's from, but I wanna say it's also German.
If you're looking
Is
dumplings,
it-
soup dumplings in particular, it's probably Eastern Europe. They do a ton of soup dumplings over there.
That would make sense, yeah. Oh yeah, here it is. Just a little bit down. Czech liver dumplings. So yeah, Europe.
Yeah, Eastern Europe. That makes sense. Yeah. Do you want to move
Brown
on
liver, egg, garlic, salted.
to?
Yeah,
Or you want to
yeah,
move
we
on
can
to
move on.
heart here?
Yeah, that's the one that I'm excited for the most, because I mean, the only heart I think I've ever had is chicken heart. If I've had beef heart, I don't remember it.
Yeah,
I'm sure I have.
Heart's a weird one because it's more of a muscle than an organ as far as composition goes. It's got pretty much no fat, and it's really tough. So the best option I've seen is just to marinate it for a couple of days, and then just to slice it up and grill it. And it has like a strong meaty flavor to it. I know a lot of
Would
I know a lot of I think it's South American cuisines are big on grilled heart. I think it's popular in the Mediterranean as well, like grilled heart.
does it compare to chicken heart?
Beef heart has a much stronger flavor. Chicken hearts, like they've got the meaty flavor, but they're so much smaller. It's a much different composition. Well, no, I shouldn't say much different. It's very similar composition. It's just because the chicken hearts are so small, and most often when you get them, they're frozen. That it's just different because when you're getting something that's small and it's frozen, it tends to be pretty wet.
Yeah, okay. And the beef heart's so much bigger that it's like
Yeah, it's pretty big.
you can slice it up as well and into its sections, and so with I mean chicken hearts you just eat them.
I have heard of chefs serving like a diced up heart as a tartare, but with tartares you really have to get a high quality supply of meat that's pretty fresh, and you've got to know your sanitation big time. So I don't know the ins and outs of serving heart as tartare, but I have heard of it.
I never even knew you could do that. So holy shit. Heart tartare. How are you planning on cooking the heart that you picked up?
Well, I don't have a grill, so I'm probably gonna marinate it, and then I may just I don't know. I may just slice it up and bread it, maybe toss some cornstarch and just fry it up and see what happens. I really haven't figured out what I'm going to do with the heart yet.
Oh wow. Yeah, there's some delicious sounding recipes for the tartar. Yeah, I could definitely see you being up that line.
Yeah, tartars are fun, but you can get in a lot of trouble if you screw them up. Like, if you fuck up a tartare, I mean, your restaurant could get shut down.
Why? What makes it so dangerous?
It's raw meat. The tartare is raw meat. That's what makes it dangerous. If you're getting just say factory farmed meat, and maybe it's not the freshest, and you're serving that raw, you could really hurt someone if you're not careful, because it's not high quality meat. It's not fresh meat, so bacteria have developed in there, and it could get messy. Someone could get sick, and they call the health inspector, or that person calls the health inspector. Health inspector comes in like, oh yeah, we heard someone got sick here, had like your beef tartare or something. Can we see your beef? Wow, that's really shitty beef. It's pretty dangerous.
I thought you meant it was a little bit more dangerous to use heart. I just misunderstood, I think.
Oh well, no, I can't speak for that, because I don't know the ins and outs of serving raw organ meat. I really couldn't tell you, man.
Yeah.
You have to clean heart really well if you're gonna do something like that. Like, there's probably gonna be some blood poking around inside of the valves. You're gonna have to take the valves out and all that fun stuff.
Holy shit. Yeah, there's quite a few different it's a versatile organ that can be slow cooked, quickly grilled, or seared, or even ground up for heart burgers. Wow.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I may end up just braising it or something.
Yeah.
That would be pretty good, braised off in a dark beer or something like that.
Right?
I kind of liked your idea of the cutlets with it, but organ meat is not something I would ever do a tartare myself with, because I'm not even familiar with it. I think I would start with trying cutlets like you were suggesting with the liver and heart. My father loves and eats a lot of blood sausage or blood pudding. What is in blood pudding, Chef?
Blood sausage, or black pudding, as it's typically called in the UK, is wonderful, wonderful stuff. It's pretty much just I don't know if it's pork or beef. I think it's beef, but it's thickened with blood, actual blood. The blood is the thickener in the sausage, and that's where it gets its name from. And it has a nice dark sort of blood color to it. And when you fry it up, the flavor is incredible once the blood caramelizes and everything. It's hard to get up here because there are all these regulations around selling blood. I mean, typically you can only find frozen blood, but if you find the right butcher, and wink wink, you could get some fresh blood. I know I talked to a Scottish butcher here in town who did black pudding, and that's what he did. He would just go to a butcher who would give him fresh blood, and he would make a sausage from that. Blood sausage is by far the best sausage, and blood sausage, black pudding, I would recommend every single person here, if you have an opportunity to try it. It is wonderful.
I've tried it quite a few times. He's actually got my 3-year-old nephew addicted to the stuff, and he calls it black pudding treasure.
It really is.
I'm not a fan. My dad is, of course, from the Britain, and that's what his family grew up on, so he's passing the traditions on.
There's so many different sausages and puddings that people just can't get over the texture or the look or whatever. But when you actually can get over that, it can be some of the most delicious stuff. I'm trying to think of what that white sausage that they have at Costco. It's a German type of Weisswurst.
Weisswurst, yeah, a white sausage. It'd be Weisswurst.
Yeah, and you boil it, you don't fry it, and oh my god, it's so good. Off-putting to look at if you're not used to something like that, but you try it, and yeah, a little bit of mustard and that makes a really good breakfast. How do you say it? Weisswurst?
Weisswurst. So the Germans, they pronounce the W with a V.
Weisswurst.
Yeah, Weisswurst.
Okay, that makes sense. Weisswurst. It's fucking good. And if you ever get a chance if you're ever at a Costco and you see it, I would definitely pick it up. It turned out to be one of my favorite sausages because of the simplicity into it, and it makes really good for camping and stuff. I don't even know what the fuck's in it, to be honest with you, but it's good.
Vice first, I believe, is a pork sausage. It's probably going to be all the spices that go in it that make it so delicious in your case.
Yeah, hey.
Probably a lot of white pepper by my guess, just because the black pepper is going to, of course, show up in the finished product.
Oh yeah, yeah. Pork back bacon, parsley, lemon, mace, onions, ginger. What is cardamom?
Cardamom is
Never heard of that.
well, there are two different types of cardamom. It's a spice that comes from East India, or India, whatever the hell you want to call it. You've got the green cardamom pods, which have sort of a fruity, spicy flavor to them, and then you have the brown cardamom pods, which are sort of a darker, little bit of a fruity flavor to them. Then, yeah, they just really depends on what you want to do. A lot of people actually like using, say, green cardamom with chocolate, or I've seen people use cardamom with dairy, like with milk. They'll heat up some milk, they'll put some green cardamom pods in there. Well, that would be quite nice.
Mm.
Yeah, I use cardamom for chai tea. I make like a homemade tea, and that's what I throw in there.
Never, ever, ever buy powdered cardamom. Just buy the whole stuff and just crush it up and use it.
As for I think the last offcut that we could talk about there is tongue. And you were mentioning, Chef, that you like to make it into sandwich meat. I personally don't like tongue. I never could get over it. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's not cooked right, but it seems that yeah, again, it's not meat. It's muscle. So I don't know. It's one of those things that just off put me.
Well, I can tell you're not French because you don't like tongue, eh? Wink, wink.
Yeah,
Yeah, tongue isn't an organ at all. It's 100% a muscle. It's got no fat on it, and if you get the bigger animals like beef or bison, you can get these huge tongues. And the typical preparation for a tongue is you'll simmer it off for about 8 hours or so. Again, depending on the size. I like to just get a nice aromatic broth going. So I did a bison tongue a couple years back, and I just threw a bunch of rosemary, juniper berries, probably a lot of pepper in there. I might have thrown some thyme in there as well. Might have put some red wine vinegar in there. I don't recall. But I put it on the stove, brought it to a simmer, turned the heat down, and then left for work. Came home, took it off the stove, and then as soon as you take a tongue out, you have to peel the skin off right away because it comes off when it's hot, and then you just let it cool, and then you pretty much just treat it like roast meat or something. So you slice it up, and it's quite nice for sandwiches, because things like hot dogs actually come from tongue meat. Once you see tongue meat up close, once you've cooked it, you're like, oh, that's where hot dogs come from, and it makes a lot of sense. So I mean, people have been eating tongue for a while; they just don't know about it. They're just kind of bigoted against it. It's like, oh, it's tongue. Well, no, it's meat. Relax.
I want to address a question in the chat from Ram3. How well does tongue preserve?
Well, it depends on how you want to preserve it. So, because tongue doesn't have any fat, and it's just pretty much straight protein, it's not going to last terribly long unless you freeze it or something. You have to realize that high protein items like meat, like even like rice that have been prepared with, or that have water content in it, right? Like if they've been cooked, if they've been raw, whatever. I mean, in the case of rice, if it's been cooked, they're susceptible to bacterial growth, and that's how you can make people sick. So, again, if it smells off, don't eat it. Just be reasonable. I mean, wrap things up when you're done with them and refrigerate them. But you could probably pickle tongue and you'd be all right. I have heard of pickle tongue before. My use case is I use it for sandwich meat. I'm sure that it's been used in the past for things like head cheese, which is another interesting tangent if we want to go on it. But yeah, it really depends on what your preservation technique is. I can't really give you any detail otherwise.
What is head cheese?
So head cheese is actually what's called a terrine. So a terrine tends to be where you take ground meat, sort of like a pate, and you can put all sorts of different ingredients in a terrine. It doesn't have to be meat, and then you just sort of you push it all into this dish, a terrine mold, and it tends to be like almost like a hot dog shaped casserole dish, if that makes sense. And then typically you'll either boil it off, or not boil it off, like poach it. You'll poach it in water, or I've seen people do it in sort of steam injection ovens and other things. I'm not really a pate or terrine expert, but head cheese is a terrine with a lot of the offcuts. So you've got the face meat, so the jowls, the cheeks. You've got the tongue. You've got the ears. I should be a little more careful there. So you've got the jowl, the cheek meat. You'll have the tongue meat in there as well, but you'll have a lot of what's called aspic. So aspic is what you get when you take a bunch of gelatinous cuts, like ears, feet, tail. You'll throw a bunch of bones in there as well, and you cook them off in some water, and all the gelatin comes out of the bones, out of all those cuts, and just sort of coagulates with the water. And so you have jello, right? You've got meat jello, and then you would pour a bunch of that aspic into the meat mix, and it would help it solidify. So you cook it together, and it's pretty much just it's like a meat log that's bound with gelatin, and so you slice it, and then that becomes the head cheese.
Weird. I've seen lots of pictures and stuff like that. I never knew what it was, so thank you for clearing that up.
Yeah, aspic is one of those things that I'm pretty iffy on. I don't like the texture of aspic, but then again, when we did pates and terrines, we only did a little bit of pates and terrines in culinary school. We used powdered aspic. We didn't actually make our own aspic like people used to do back in the day with all the offcuts and the bones and such. So I'd be kind of interested in making a proper head cheese with a proper aspic.
And yeah, you would like to make that aspect yourself.
Of course, yeah.
Where does aspect normally come from?
Well, it's like I described. So you're taking the gelatinous parts of the animal. So that tends to involve joints, right? So your feet, your ears, your tail, and then you'll throw some bones in there, like neck bones. Have some good gelatin in them. And
So you're just going
well.
for that inner part right where the joint is all together. Then that you're just sieving that off, so to speak.
Yeah, and in the case of beef, if you use veal has a lot more collagen in it because it's a younger animal. As you may know, yes, anything with cartilage, Dubs is right here. So as animals mature, that collagen turns into bone, right? So if you get a young chicken and you break open the keel bone, it's actually not really bone, it's cartilage, so it's going to have a lot of collagen in it. But as that chicken matures, it just becomes straight up bone.
Ah, that makes total sense. I actually get what you're saying there. Yeah. Because yeah, when you got veal or any young animal, when you open it up, it's different. The bones are different. The joints are
The bones
different.
are softer, yeah.
Yeah. There was an experiment using different bones that this is a little bit off topic, but it was in a science class, and they took different bones of different aged, I believe it was chicken and beef, and they've stuck them in different pops, different cola drinks, and all of the young animals, anything that was like not fully developed, would just turn to mush, turn to like little holes in it right away. And although the older ones did as well, it took much longer. And it was and the whole thing was to talk about how bad pop is for young kids and bullshit and whatever. But I don't know. But I remember watching that dissolve and thinking, holy shit, like, that's fucking crazy. And knowing the bones and seeing young animals, I could totally see where you get that gelatin from. I never knew that's what it was. And I've seen people boiling that stuff off all the time. Or yeah, like you said, poaching it, because you're not really boiling. I guess it's a lower temperature, right?
When you're cooking terrines, yeah, you're poaching it, because a more violent temperature, like a boil or something, is just going to shake things up.
Huh.
So
I'd definitely like to see something
to
like
poach
that.
is basically to put something in hot enough water that it's like just before it's starting to bubble, and then just to leave it at that temperature.
So you'd have to have some good control of heat.
Well, I mean,
If you're using a
yeah,
gas
I can
stove,
do it on an electric stove. You could do it on a ceramic stove as well. It's easier
using
on a
a
gas
diffuser
stove.
or something like that on a gas stove.
If you're really worried about the temperature, you could throw a thermometer in there, but I just go off of visual cues. So if you have steam coming out, but it's not like a vigorous steam, it's just a little bit of steam, that's a poaching temperature. So you're okay as long as you keep it there.
Okay.
That's how I judge water. Like if there's a little bit of steam coming out, like, oh, I'm at poaching heat. If there's, a fair amount of steam starting to get a little vigorous, oh, hey, yeah, it's at a simmering heat. And then when it's starting to bubble and the steam's getting really angry, okay, yeah, it's at boiling heat. That's just one of those chef tricks that you pick up over time.
One thing I know about different temperatures with many different things versus it being metal or food. Just a little bit too much or just a little not enough can really ruin your fucking day.
Yeah, you better believe it, dude.
Oh yeah. I love cooking, but I hate fucking up.
I've been there many times. I made the mistake once of trying to boil vermicelli noodles. They ended up mushy pretty fast.
Oh yeah, I did
What-
that once. The really
What are
thin,
those?
the rice noodles, the really thin rice noodles.
Yeah, how long does it take to fucking boil those?
You don't
You
boil
don't
them.
boil them.
You just pour hot water over them.
Oh shit, and you fucked that up.
Yeah, because I tried to cook them like pasta. I didn't even read the package. I was just stupid.
That was probably before culinary school.
This was during culinary school, not
Typical
at
man.
school, but at home.
So here we are talking about different strange meats, and I just noticed that in the Discord, Pumpkin was asking us about horse meat, and if that's a thing, or if you can buy that in certain provinces, because he says his butcher happens to carry horse meat.
Well, tell that bastard to get in the YouTube chat if he wants to ask questions. I'm not gonna fucking hop on the Discord midstream. For fuck's
I
sake.
just noticed.
You think a veteran would have his shit together?
No, not at all.
Okay, well, I can't speak.
No, no.
I can't speak for other jurisdictions. I know in Europe, horse meat is quite popular, and probably because he's in Quebec, that's why it's available. I have heard of restaurants. I know My boss is telling me he went to a restaurant in Vancouver and had some horse meat. I've heard of a horse heart tartare in particular. So I think if you look at the higher end market, it is available. Myself, I haven't heard of horse meat here in Alberta, but I don't check the small towns often enough, so I can't really speak to it. Boomer probably knows more about it than I do. But as far as the meat
to
goes,
be honest with you, I wouldn't even think about
I've never
what
had horse
would
meat.
be.
I've heard it's quite similar to bison in its composition, just a really low amount of fat. As far as flavor, I think we were asking someone about that. I don't know if it was Casper or Heights. We were talking about horse meat. Might have even been Nugs. One of the farmers, we were talking about horse meat. I think said it was quite similar to bison, just not as gamey.
Another
Okay.
meat that I've never eaten.
No, I knew that they used horses as a food for a long time, and people didn't even. So some of the history books that I read, people didn't even use them for riding. They didn't even use them for work. They were just strictly food. And then some civilizations started using them for horse, and it spread like wildfire.
Well, I've read in some books, War and Peace, for example, by Tolstoy, the Russian army even says, we're going to make them eat horse flesh. So I don't think it was seen as desirable. It's kind of a shitty meat. But it makes sense, say, if you've got a racehorse or something and he breaks his leg. I mean, he's fucking useless, right? Are you just going to throw that animal away, or what are you going to do? It makes sense to butcher it as food if you're willing to eat it.
Yeah, send it to the glue factory.
Yeah, pretty much.
And I would never think that it would be a good meat to eat just because of it's always in strain, it's always running, it's always constantly moving.
Yeah, which means
making
there's
those
no
muscles tough.
tender cut anywhere.
No, it's all tough. It's all that would be my guess anyway.
I'm gonna start the lasagna.
Okay. Ooh.
You're
I'm just
having
gonna
lasagna?
step. Yeah, I'm off duty today.
Wait, you
So
have
you guys
somebody who
just
cooks
like
for
that.
you? That exists?
Nah, does it come out of a cardboard box count?
How do I get one of these
No.
people to cook food for me?
Talk really nice to them until you have them like believing you're this really nice guy, then ask them to marry you.
Oh, that doesn't sound so good after all.
No, I gotta grab a coffee. I'll be back in like 30 seconds. But if we want to move into the knives section, get into the tools.
Oh, the tools. Is it time to whip our tools out?
My tools always whipped out.
Well, that explains a lot. That's why he's always coming and going, eh? Okay, so Boomer really wanted to know about tools, because every chef is loyal to his tools, blah, 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 blah. So, when I got into culinary school, I was told, okay, you're going to need to have what's called a small wares kit. You're going to need to have all these different tools for when you're in what's called the lab, or the kitchen at school. So, my first year, I borrowed a toolbox from a friend of mine, and he had some tools in it, and I used that. And then I thought to myself, okay, I'm just going to buy all my own tools, and I'm going to buy the best quality tools I can so they're going to last a long time. So over the course of the next about year and a half, I've just bought really good quality tools from my local restaurant supply store, and I built up 2 toolboxes. So I have one toolbox for just general chef tools, and I have another toolbox for what I call baker tools. And I was the guy who lugged a couple different toolboxes and a knife bag around class, and people would just laugh at me. Until it came to actually working in class, and I had all the tools in it. Like, oh, hey, look, he's got a digital scale, he's got a blowtorch. Hey, yeah, can I just borrow that? Can I borrow that? Hey, you're pretty cool after all. So I have probably 100 different tools at my place right now, and I've got about maybe 12 to 15 different tools just in my kitchen, along with a knife bag with probably like 10 or 12 different knives. It really does depend on the use case, what you're doing, but some tools are really, really versatile, and if you put the money down, they'll last you a long time. So, for example, if you go to a restaurant supply store and you buy one of those high-quality Rubbermaid spatulas, the ones that you could throw in a deep fryer and they'll still be okay. Like, they're tempered up to, I think, 500 degrees Fahrenheit. Those are going to last you a very long time unless you do something stupid.
So do you keep these things all in an actual toolbox?
My professional tools that I would use for catering, yeah, they're in a couple toolboxes in my laundry room right now, and I'll pull them out from time to time if I need them. Like, I've got a plastic bowl scraper I use for bread that I've been pulling out there, and I'll pull my scale out pretty often and use that. And then I have a set of tools that stay at home with me that are just hanging in my kitchen right now.
Yeah, we are quite the opposite. I don't have any fancy tools. I usually get my tools from places like Value Village.
Which I would actually advise against unless you're getting vintage tools. Vintage tools tend to be very well made and last a long time, but most of the tools you're getting, I mean, please don't buy your spatulas and your tongs from Safeway or Winners or any of those places, because they're almost guaranteed to be cheap Chinese shit. Go to either a restaurant supply store if you live in a major city or near one. The big one in Canada is called Russell Hendricks, and they've got locations in pretty much every city in Canada, every big city anyway. And then my city here in Edmonton's got probably 5 or 6 different restaurant supply stores you can go to that'll sell this stuff. If you don't have any of those available, go to an antique store or a place that tends to carry antiques. I've found some very nice kitchen tools in antique stores. I bought an aluminum citrus reamer, an open cup canning funnel, a nice jar lifter, a nice metal egg beater, all from a local antique store, and they were pretty cheap, and all of them either made in Canada or made in the U.S. because they're old. You really have to watch out for cheap Chinese shit when it comes to kitchen tools. Some of these things will break, and they will break fast. So you've got to buy professional quality if you can help it. I can't recommend that enough. Don't cheap out on kitchen tools.
Oh yeah, fuck. Even Walmart. I just bought little teaspoon measuring spoons, and got them home. Not, fuck, the old ones are done, so I just bought some cheap ones thinking, they're just fucking measuring spoons. What could go wrong, right? The fucking white shit that's written on there washed away.
Oh, boomer.
So, first time I used it, all this white stuff started flaking off. I was like, oh, that's fucking awesome. So, yeah, I don't use those anymore. Now you have no idea which one's which.
Right.
Yeah, once you get an idea of what the good brands are, you can be pretty picky with tools, and you'll know where to find them. But people will even go into the wholesale clubs here in the city and buy tools, and those are a step up from your cheap crap, but they're not great either. It's the restaurant supply stores that really have the high quality stuff. And
yeah, stainless steel and stuff like that.
Yes. Yeah, things that are actually built to withstand heavy use. If you use your kitchen a lot, you're going to need heavy duty tools. It's just that simple.
It's funny because I absolutely agree with that, because all my fucking cups that I've got, they were given to me, right? Like your measuring cups. They're all plastic, and flour, sugar, rice, anything like that will suck moisture away, and eventually the plastic will become brittle over time just from using it on that stuff. So I wanted to get some nice stainless ones, and that's what I was looking for. So I think maybe I might have to make a detour and go pick up some good ones. Like, my camping stuff is better than what I have in my kitchen.
Well, the good news for you is there are actually a couple restaurant supply stores on the closer towards where you are in Edmonton, because you're outside Edmonton, that are pretty accessible off of the ring road there. So you should be all right. I'll send you some links later.
Cool. It'd be good because stepping up that the game when it comes to stuff inside the kitchen.
Do you have any tools in particular you want to ask about, like what you can do with them or whatever?
More like specific tools that you would recommend for anybody who really wants to get into anything. Is there like we do a lot of beef talk and stuff like that. I know I have a couple little odds and ends that I like using, but when it comes to like real culinary items, is there anything that you would recommend that you would have to have in your kitchen if you're going to be doing any serious cooking?
Okay, you need the following tools minimum. You need a good pair of metal tongs. Don't use plastic tongs. They've got to be metal plastic melts. Get a nice high quality spatula if you can afford it. Get a good quality French or piano whisk. Get a good quality wire mesh sieve. Get a nice stainless steel colander, one that pretty much takes up your entire sink, the biggest you can get.
Yeah, I got one of those. I love it.
Yeah, and get some pitchers. I recommend Cambro pitchers, the high quality, high density plastic. Those are quite good, and they come in a variety of sizes. Don't use glass. I know people like their Pyrexes because they look cool, but glass breaks. Get your high quality plastic Cambro pitchers.
Yeah, even if it cracks, it doesn't go all over the place and doesn't go into food and shit.
And then
Pyrex, it breaks, you're fucked.
Yeah, get some ladles. Ladles are pretty important as well. They're good time savers. And those are probably the most important tools you're going to need in a kitchen. I mean, there are others, but those are probably the most important.
You were saying spatulas. I have a few bamboo items in my kitchen, and I've got a lot of wooden spoons. So I've got bamboo spatulas, a couple bamboo slotted spoons. How do you feel about bamboo?
Oh, thanks for mentioning the slotted spoon. That's another important tool. You should have a good slotted spoon. I think bamboo is just one of those materials that, because it's cheap and because they can pump it out of Asia pretty fast, that it's being sold in stores. I mean, it looks kind of cool, but the problem with the wooden tools is, unless like they're really well built and they're thick like a proper wooden spoon, they're just going to sort of erode over time, and then they don't work in really high temperatures. They just warp once you get into high temperatures. So, yeah, I mean, you've really got to be careful. It's of course, it's meant for the housewife demographic, like, right? I mean, we don't see that many housewives, right? But that's just
when it comes to bamboo, though, bamboo is a great wood for that kind of stuff. It really holds up well. It's very, very hard. In some cases, it's hard to work with. So if you can get a good tool in bamboo, I would say that's gonna outlast your ordinary spoons and stuff like that. It's very good at repelling water. It's naturally repellent to water. I wouldn't suggest leaving it in water while it's boiling or anything. But yeah, any of my bamboo tools actually have outlasted anything else that I have besides metal. And yeah, so I like that. It's not like oak even oak is a nice hard wood, but if you use it in water and then put it away dry, and it'll start cracking and deteriorating. But I've never had that issue with bamboo.
Well, that's interesting. The only wooden tools you're going to see in a professional kitchen are wooden spoons. And they just, they're almost like antiques at this point. Most of the tools tend to be either stainless steel or that tempered plastic.
I would be more with the bamboo. One of the things I would be more concerned about is the ends being porous and being able to absorb bacteria. But any wooden is like that. You should always keep them clean and dry, or else they can build up with bacteria, right? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, Juicy.
That's okay. I was gonna say the only thing I use wooden spoons for primarily is when I make kombucha, because you don't want to use steel in the tea or the kombucha, and for canning because you don't want to use metal when you're doing your pressure canning. They say don't use any metal utensils, so that's why I have wooden and bamboo spoons.
Right, because the
And
metal's
flip.
going to react. That makes sense.
That's right. But I do like my bamboo spatula. I'm a housewife, so I use that for flipping pancakes. And it's great because I've got cast iron and I don't want to use plastics. I just use the bamboo spatula for stuff like that in my cast iron.
Well, my friend Sherman makes these grill cleaners for your barbecue, and they're all wood. They have no metal in them whatsoever. And the more you use them, the better the grill, it cleans the grill. And he turns them on a lathe and then cleans them all up really nice. And I think that's an idea, because if you have one of those metal scrapers for your barbecue, I don't know if you guys heard about that kid. I guess it was Edmonton maybe 2019. Had one of the barbs from the barbecue go into his throat. So just like any good tool, I got rid of all my metal barbecue ones and I use a bamboo bristle brush, but I could still see you doing the same thing. The bristles breaking off and going into your food or
Yeah,
something along those lines.
that's actually a frustrating story with the wire brushes. So you work in a professional kitchen on a grill or something, you're going to have the carbon build up on your grill, and the wire brushes do a great job of scrubbing that off. So you're still going to see a fair amount of kitchens with the wire brushes, but there's always like that one corner case, right? Like, one in a million, somebody managed to get a bristle of steel, and then oh no, nobody can use them anymore, right? So you look at the chain restaurants; they won't be using stuff like that. So now we have to find an alternative because of pretty much what happened was you had one of those Facebook stories where all the moms just get all worried.
Exactly
like,
what it was.
No, oh no, oh no. So then they tell their husbands, no, you get rid of that wire brush right now. No. Right? I know lots of people.
I think
like
it depends on the wire brushes too. The ones that oh shit, they have a twist in them. Those ones I find are really bad. They start coming apart, and yeah, you have lots of metal little fabrics. Oh, my buddy Sherman is in the chat right now. He says beeswax and coconut oil works great to preserve your wood spoons, and the ratio should be 4-to-1 for coconut oil and 1 beeswax.
I have never heard of somebody ingesting a bristle from a wire brush until this Facebook story.
I've heard of it before, but not on a barbecue, and that's the only place I've ever used it, but I don't use them anymore at all. I just, fuck it. I get it really, really hot and cook on top of it and don't have a problem.
I was gonna say I just crank the shit out of my barbecue when I'm done.
I customized my barbecue so I don't have the propane anymore because I really fucking didn't like the propane. So I took the bottom propane out, and I still have the back sear burner on the side, and I have the back what the fuck is it called? The infrared heater for doing your rotisserie. So I still have that under gas, but I went to charcoal and I can do my own smoking and stuff right in my barbecue now.
Well, I do want to pull a
get it right
picture up
hot.
just on the topic of tools here. So this is a mortar and pestle. For those who don't know, they're hard to find if you want a good one. This one's about, I think, 8 inches wide. It's pretty deep and it's heavy, as you can see. It's proper stone from, I think it's either Thailand or Vietnam, and you can buy them in your Chinatown stores, your Asian supermarkets. I haven't had any luck with TNT with with mortars and pestles. But if you go to the more, let's say, authentic Asian supermarkets, if you poke around, you can find these things. And this is probably my favorite tool in the entire kitchen. I wish more people used these things because they are so versatile. You can do so many things with them, but most people don't know how to use them.
I think I'd like to learn a few things from you on that one because, yeah, I was mentioning it earlier. I've been looking for a decent mortar and pestle. I had one when I was in my 20s, but it was really small, good for bachelor, but you make one meal and I mean, you could be sitting there for an hour trying to get your ingredients to crush down. So I always wanted to
Small
get a
mortars
bigger
and
one.
pestles just suck. They're a waste of time. Don't bother.
It's a
You
yeah,
need a big
it's
one.
useless. It's yeah.
So this is what you would use to grind down your cardamom pods.
Yeah, and it's quite easy. So you would take, say, your green cardamom pods, and you would just toast them up in a pan, just a dry pan on about medium heat until they got hot, and then you would dump them all in the mortar and pestle, and then you would just crush them up, right? You would take your mortar, just boom, 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 crush them up a bit, and then throw them in whatever. This is how you make some nice masalas. We'll get into masalas later from East Indian cuisine, but like a really nice spice mix is you toast up your whole spices, you grind them down, or you at least bash them down with your mortar, and then they go inside of a spice grinder until they're nice and fine, because you'll never get anything fine from mortar and pestle unless you want to spend 3 hours, which is just a gigantic waste of time. But if you want to go into even more detail, something like a pesto, a lot of people know is kind of like that Italian pasta sauce. Where does a pesto come from? Well, pesto actually comes from pestle. It's made in a mortar and pestle. And what you do is you crush up your garlic, you crush up your pine nuts, you crush up your basil leaves. You get them all nice and fine, and then you use your mortar like a whisk, and you throw your cheese in there, and you break that up. You throw your oil in there, and then you just mix it all together. There's something
All right inside the mortar.
Yes, yeah, and
Really?
something else that's similar is an aioli. And if any of you here have ever been to a fancy restaurant, they're going to serve you an aioli. Well, I'll let you in on a secret. It's not an aioli, they're lying to you. It's just a flavored mayonnaise. A real aioli is when you typically start mortar and pestle, you bash some garlic up, and maybe you'll put some lemon juice in there, and then you just start whisking in with your mortar. You just start whisking in oil, and you keep whisking it together until you have an emulsion, and then it's this thick, gloopy spread. It's thicker than a mayonnaise. It's kind of fluffy too. You don't have to put egg in there. Some people put egg in there, like an egg yolk, to stabilize the emulsion, but a proper old school aioli is not made with egg, and it's made in a mortar and pestle. It is not mayonnaise.
You see those lemon with a lemon dill aioli kind of thing? It's like a thick, almost like a cream, I guess.
Well,
Is that
it's
what-
really, really hard to find an authentic aioli because you pretty much have to make it from scratch just because it doesn't have any egg in it, so it's not really that shelf stable. The restaurants, and this is probably one of the things that bugs me about restaurants the most, is all they will do is they will take some pasteurized mayonnaise, so mayonnaise that's made from pasteurized eggs that just comes in like a 16-liter bucket. They'll just put a bunch of that into a container. They'll throw some flavorings in, like they'll throw some basil leaves in, and then they'll just grab a stick blender and they'll blend it all together and call it basil aioli, which is a lie. It's just basil mayonnaise.
That's not very good.
Pretty much every restaurant does this, and it really pisses me off. That if you go to like just a chain burger restaurant and they serve you chipotle mayo, and if you go to say like a premium casual chain restaurant and they serve you spicy aioli, they're almost the same thing. The spicy aioli will probably be made with sriracha and mayonnaise. The chipotle mayo will just be made with mayonnaise and ground up chipotle pepper. They're both flavored mayonnaise. It's just a total farce.
Cheating. It's cheating. I always thought it was mayonnaise. So, it shows you how much I know. I did. I always thought it was mayonnaise was the thing. Because I've had that a friend of ours makes an aioli sauce. Yeah, I think it's lemon and dill. It's got to be lemon and dill. And I would like to get it for my salmon. I put a type of dill sauce on my salmon. But I think that would be...
If you go poking around on the internet, if you go poking around on YouTube and you search for aioli, or the French also do something called a roux, you can find what it looks like, how it's made traditionally. And you look at videos where they make it in a mortar and pestle, and you're like, holy shit, I've never had this before. This is way different. They're lying to me.
How do you spell it?
Aioli is spelled A-I-O-L-I.
A-I-O-L-I.
And then roux is spelled R-O-U-I-L-L-E. Yeah, you can even look it up right now if you want to, just to see what it looks like.
Oh, yeah, okay. You could have like breadcrumbs in there, garlic, saffron, cayenne pepper. Garnish with... Yeah, oh yeah, okay, so fish soup, and notably... So that is exactly what I'm looking for.
Yeah, roux tends to go with a bouillabaisse, which is that classic French fisherman stew.
That's how you pronounce that?
Bouillabaisse?
It's like a big long word, right? Like it's quite a big word.
Yeah,
I had no idea.
bouillabaisse.
I know exactly what that word is, but I never could pronounce it. I'm an idiot when it comes to pronouncing words, so just so we know.
No,
I'm good at
I don't
pronouncing
blame you.
words
I mean,
like
the French dominated cooking for a long time, so we had to learn all sorts of obscure French names for sauces, like a Bordelaise sauce, like an Espagnole sauce, blah, blah, blah. Most of this never even gets used anymore.
Alright, I'm gonna bookmark that, because that looks like a really good recipe. Oh yeah, that's awesome. Directions on there and everything.
The aioli is essentially very similar to toum garlic sauce that you would get at like Lebanese food.
Yeah, I think so. It's a similar thickness. I would say similar composition.
Yeah, garlic, salt, and oil and lemon juice, essentially.
Yes.
That stuff is heavenly.
Mash it until it's like a nice thick paste.
Boomer, do you want me to get into knives next?
Yeah, I like knives.
Yeah, you seem like a guy who'd like knives.
Yeah. They all have a different purpose.
Yes, that's true. Okay, so with knives, you have two major different types of steel. You have stainless steel and carbon steel. Carbon steel is what swords were made from back in the day. It rusts pretty easily. It also chips pretty easily, but it's really sharp. So if you know how to maintain them, carbon steel knives are wonderful, but they're also expensive, which one of the reasons why you don't see much of them anymore. And then you have stainless steel knives. Stainless steel knives are everywhere. Most people have stainless steel knives at home. And they don't rust up unless you soak them in water for a long time and do stupid things to them. And they don't chip unless you do stupid things to them, like drop them on the floor. But they're not as sharp as carbon steel. And they tend to be a thicker blade, so it's tougher to get finer cuts out of them. Your most common brands of stainless steel knives are going to be your Wusthof out of Germany. Wustof's a good brand. You get your Victorinox knives out of Switzerland. And you get your Henkels or your Zwilling knives, which I believe are also out of Germany. Those are the main brands for stainless knives. Wusthof being the best out of those. And then your carbon steel knives tend to come from Japan. You can also get stainless knives from Japan, but they pump out a lot of carbon steel knives. So I would say maybe the past 10 years or so, Japanese knives have become very popular in the professional kitchen. Most of my knives are Japanese knives.
Oh,
And most
and
of the
they
knives
are
I see are
beautiful.
Japanese. They're thinner and they tend to hold an edge better, so you can do finer cuts with them. The problem is you pretty much have to live in a big city to get access to Japanese knives, or you have to order them online. So here in Canada, almost every major city has a store called Knifeware, which is a chain out of Calgary, and they sell Japanese knives. They tend to be overpriced with their knives, but they know their stuff out there, and you get to play with all sorts of knives. Like they'll let you test out their knives, just slicing a tomato or something, so you can play around with them. And they have a good selection. There's a former chef out of Montreal who has a website called Paul's Finest, and he also is a Japanese knife reseller. I haven't bought knives off him, but I've bought whetstones off of him, and he knows his stuff too. He's a little cheaper. For a home chef, I would recommend stainless steel knives. Like just go with a Wusthof or something. But for someone who is either a professional or wants to maybe cook like a professional, I would recommend Japanese knives. Start with a stainless Jap knife, and then once you figure out how to maintain that, and then you look into how to maintain a carbon steel knife, you can move up to a carbon steel knife. I don't have any pictures for you, but I'll go over my basic knife set. So I just have kind of like a little ceramic pocket knife that I carry around with me, and I use that for opening packages, for cutting masking tape labels, and other little jobs. And then I have a couple what are called petty knives. So they're kind of halfway between a paring knife and, let's say, like a utility vegetable knife. So they tend to be about, I think it's like 120 millimeters is the length on them, and they're nice for small little jobs. Say like maybe you're dicing a strawberry or something, or slicing a strawberry. It's very good for that. Just smaller jobs. And then I have a couple chef's knives for just general purpose use. I have a Japanese chef's knife called a gyudo that I use exclusively for meat. So if I have to slice a bunch of meat, or if I have to dice meat, if I do a bunch of meat processing, I will use the gyudo. And this gyudo is carbon steel. And it was an expensive knife, and it requires a lot of maintenance. So I actually have to put what's called a forced patina on it, which means I pretty much have to force a rust coating on it. So I'll leave it soaking in vinegar water overnight, and then I'll put a rust coating on it, and I just sort of wipe it off. And then as it dries, it just forms a rust coating, so then the rust stays off of it. But you have to keep that up to date, because with your carbon steel knives, if you leave them wet, they will rust up. And yeah, you really have to be on top of cleaning them. And because they're sharper,
Just stain easy and everything.
because they're sharper, and because the blade is thinner, they chip. They chip really fast. So the fine dining restaurant I worked at, I used my gyudo a lot because I didn't really have a better chef's knife, and I had to sharpen every week because it kept chipping. It was really frustrating. But now that I just use it for meat, it doesn't chip up much, which is nice. And then I've got boning knives. If you do a lot of butchery, boning knives are really important. They're just these nice, thin, almost not quite paper thin, but pretty thin blades. And you use them for taking membranes and tendons and such out of meat, just trimming meat. That's what they're good for. Or if you're trying to debone something, they're really good for that. And you can get flexible boning knives as well for when you're working around tight spaces. I have both. I've got just a rigid boning knife and a flexible boning knife. And then I also have a fish filleting knife. I mean, we don't get much for fish out here, but I have one of those things, and they're quite useful to have as well, if you're working a lot with fish, of course. And then I just have some little paring knives and a bread knife. And then I have the butcher's version of a chef's knife, which is called a scimitar. It's shaped a little bit like those swords that the Muslim warriors used to carry, like the Saracens and such. They had the scimitars. It's shaped kind of like that. It's a curved blade, and it's really nice for portioning out meat because it's a nice long blade. But I use my Gyudo for that, so I've got my scimitar at home for that stuff. And if anybody ever calls something a butcher knife, that's what a butcher knife actually is. It's not a meat cleaver. A meat cleaver is something separate altogether. And I have a meat cleaver at home that I use for cutting up chicken bones and odd butchery jobs, but you don't see too many meat cleavers anymore.
No, and if you do, they're not real meat cleavers. Henkel makes a really nice meat cleaver. It's got good weight to it. You slam it down, it will go through the bone. Like, there's no question about it.
Well, most people don't know the purpose.
I have.
Most people don't know the purpose of a meat cleaver. It's just a big, scary knife. Actually, the job of a meat cleaver is to provide a coup de grace when you're going through thick bone, so kind of like that last blow when you're going through thick bone, or it's for cutting through thin bones. So to get a little morbid here, a meat cleaver would be pretty good for cutting fingers off because they're a thin bone, but if you wanted to cut someone's arm off, no, you'd have to saw it off.
Yeah, you get to a certain degree. Like if I use mine, I can't go through very thick bone at all. Whereas my buddy Bert, he's got one that, man, you slam that down, you probably go through a good 1.5 inch or maybe 2 inch bone if you really want. Like, it's so much weight to it.
In case you were wondering, YouTube, this is for mature audiences. Yes, we're talking about taking fingers off.
It's great for
just so you know,
going out into the bush. If you got it, I like it for that. It's good for everything. Of course, my buddy.
I've got a meat cleaver and a couple bone saws hanging from my wall within view of the entrance to my place. So I like to use it to screen out the vegans if I'm dating girls.
I saw that in your pictures there earlier. It's kind of funny because John makes them, and he said he walks back and forth from his knife shop to his house in the middle of the night carrying swords and knives, and you've got them hanging on the wall.
Well, John also wants his head stuffed on a plaque. He's in a class of his own.
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to it. I got a heli knife my wife bought me, and it's 5-inch blade, and I use it just for steak. It's my favorite knife, and I only use it for steak. And so I'll go to a restaurant or whatever, and I'll pull out this knife. And she's like, "You can't pull that out there." And I said, "Nobody can tell me that I can't use my steak knife." But no, no one has yet.
Oh, hold on, Boomer. I just want to address something from the chat here. So Dubs has a Vostok chef's knife, and he's just saying his is 10 inches, but he'd prefer an 8-inch. So 10-inch, I believe, is 240 millimeters versus the 8-inch, which is 210. 210 is your standard size, so most people will be using a 210 millimeter knife. I'm a bigger guy, so I prefer a 240 or a 10-inch there. You can also get a 12-inch or a 270 for like a really... They're good for slicing. Like if you're slicing fish or slicing meat, you want a nice long knife so you can use the whole blade. It really depends on how big your hands are, how big you are, etc. I mean, if you're just some 5'0" woman, you're not going to want an 8-inch knife. You're probably going to want to go smaller than that. Even like just a longer petty knife or something would be better for you.
That's why it's nice to have different knives. Like, I mean, you tend to find which ones you use the best and the most, and then you work around it.
You don't have to break the bank to get a good knife, but you really do have to do your research to find which knives are good. I've had the opportunity to play around with a lot of knives, so I've already got sort of an ideal chef's knife lined up. The problem is it's going to cost me about $350. Maybe, I don't even know if that's probably just before shipping, and I don't have that kind of money. My sous chef happens to have that knife at work, and I've been playing around with it, and I really, really like it and want it, but I just don't have the money for it.
I got my Cutco knife fucking, holy shit, 20 years ago. and I've never had to have them sharpened for the most part. And my straight blade is beautiful, but I know they use the 440 high carbon steel, and their grain structures are what keeps the edge sharp. And I thought that they were just going to be a shitty knife, but I've been impressed with those right from the get-go. But I would like to have a thinner blade for a little more slicing and stuff. Most of those blades are too thick to do any real, I mean, sharp enough you can cut a tomato pretty thin, but when you're cutting meat, I think I would like to have a nicer, sharper knife.
Yeah, I mean,
But then again,
I'd have to
Oh, go
test
on.
your knives out to see how really sharp they are. I mean, there's a difference between just what people perceive as sharp and then what chefs perceive as sharp. So
exactly, and that can make me lead us into the next topic.
I got to
sharpening.
do a quick little shift at a butcher shop a couple months back, and they were giving me shit saying, "Dude, your boning knife isn't sharp enough." I said, "Oh, how often do you guys sharpen your knives?" "Every day." "Oh shit, okay, I better be careful here." So everybody's different with their use cases, because butchers, when they're using knives, like they're not even sawing at anything; they're just pushing the blade right through, which is why they need peak sharpness. But getting into sharpness and sharpening, most people seem to be intimidated by it because there are a bunch of rules involved, and you can really damage a knife if you're not careful, depending on what your tools are. Which is why you have these brands saying, "Oh, you never have to sharpen your knives," so you could just cut with it forever. You don't have to maintain your knife, and I can't comment on that. But what I will say is, I have been trained in sort of the Japanese method of sharpening knives with whetstones. With whetstones, and you use water. So I've put probably $500 into whetstones and whetstone equipment, and I have a setup where I have something called a sink bridge, where I have something that spans the length of a sink, and then it's got a little fastener in there for my whetstone, and I have a whetstone holder that goes where the fastener is, and it holds my whetstone. And I have a natural whetstone. I have natural whetstones that don't need to be soaked in water. Some of the cheaper whetstones you have to soak in water, and then all I do is I put a nice coating of water on the whetstone, and then I measure my angle. So the way I was taught was you use nickels, and you stack nickels up. Each nickel represents 5 degrees, and your standard Western knife, like a Wusthof or something, you're going to sharpen at 22.5 degrees or 20 degrees, somewhere in that vicinity. And another way you can measure it without nickels, if you're doing a Western knife, is half of 90 is 45, half of 45 is 22.5. So you could just kind of do the half measurement, and you'll get your angle. And then once I have my angle set up, all I do is I work section by section on the knife. So basically, like just the section that covers the width of the whetstone, and I'll just go back and forth probably like 20 strokes. If I'm just putting an edge on my knife, I'll just use a 1,000 grit whetstone. I'll probably just do like 20 strokes per section, and then I'll just repeat that on the other side. And then you wipe your knife off, and then you'll throw it on a nice ceramic honing rod, or you can even do a strop or something to smooth the edge out. With a
Strapping the steel, they only really true the blade, right?
Yeah, well, all you're doing is you're straightening out the edge. You're smoothing it out after you've sharpened it. So a Japanese knife, what I was taught was a standard Japanese stainless steel knife. You're going to be doing it 15 degrees, so 3 nickels versus 4. And then a superior Japanese knife, like a carbon steel or something, you're going to go down to 10 degrees or 2 nickels. And there are videos you can watch online. I know Knifeware's got some videos on how to sharpen knives the Japanese way. I have a 400 grit whetstone that I'll start on if I've got a really bad edge on a knife, or if I've got some chips that I need to smooth out. And that's more of a rough grit, like a tough sandpaper. And you start there, and then you work up to like 1,000 grit, where it's a smoother edge. And I have a 5,000 grit as well. That's kind of like a showpiece, like a mirror finish type finish. And if any of you have watched,
that's a polishing.
If any of you have watched John Lapierre streams, he doesn't use whetstones. He uses sandpaper, just various grits of sandpaper. And you can see he goes, I think he said up to 6,000 or maybe 8,000 grit, and he puts a gorgeous mirror finish on his knives. But it's not practical in the
I've been
kitchen
working a
because
little bit on that knife.
it's not practical in the kitchen because that mirror finish is going to disappear right away. It's just for show, like with cars.
Yep, yep. I've been bringing the knife back. I showed you that one that I got in my garage. I haven't got a chance to really sharpen it, but I've been bringing that back. And when I got it, it was pitted and rusted and everything. And by the time I got to 600, I was starting to get a nice mirror image. Right now, I'm only at 2,500. And
You mean 6,000, right?
yeah, yeah. I've worked from 100 grit all the way to 2,500 grit.
There's
now I'm
also
working
sort of
up.
the Western way of sharpening knives where you take a cheaper whetstone and you throw some oil on it and you just sort of do one continuous stroke and you repeat that a couple of times. I've seen that done. I don't know how to do it myself, but I've seen people do that as a way to sharpen knives. But honestly, I think John Lapierre's your best bet for knife sharpening because my method is expensive and you need some toys to play around with. My method is more precise. Like I do things like I will actually thin out the blade as well as I work with it, which is a separate technique where you have to work further up towards the hilt or the butt of the blade to get a thinner profile. So I mean the whetstone method, if you really want to go fine the Japanese way, yeah. But most people are just going to want like just to keep their knives sharp, just something simple and cheap. So John's probably got something good there. You can also buy steels. I would recommend having a good steel in the kitchen. I should have recommended it earlier. And all the steel does is it'll just strip thin bits of steel off of your knife as you use it, using it at the correct angle, of course. So your steel you're going to use at the same angle you're going to sharpen it at. So with a Western knife, again, it's at 22.5 degrees that you're going to use it with.
90, 45, 22. That's a great method. That's how I was taught.
Yeah, and the typical technique if you watch cooking shows is people will hold their arm at a 45-degree angle, and then they'll come in with a knife just kind of half of that angle, and that's how they get their 22.5, and they'll just go back and forth that way. The steel is useful for keeping your edge sharp. However, your edge will not be smooth. It'll lose that smoothness over time, and eventually you will lose the edge, which is when it needs to hit a whetstone or sandpaper or something. So if you're losing your edge, but your blade doesn't have any chips, you can just throw it on 1,000 grit whetstone and bring it back within probably 20 minutes, maybe even like 15 if you're really fast, 10 or 15. And you can probably do the same thing on sandpaper, like Boomer does and like John does. And it's only when you hit the chips and you've got a really shitty edge, like your knife is actually dull, then you're going to have to throw it on a 400 to put a new edge on it and then clean it up.
Not too sure what my grit was on my whetstone, but I did have an actual Japanese whetstone, and that was the cat's ass. I used it for everything. I even sharpened my razor blades up with it because it makes that edge so much nicer. And when I'm doing masking or something like that, you can make that edge on that razor blade just beautiful. Like the razor blade they don't make them very nice anymore. They're all laser cut bullshit. So you get these razor blades. Well, if you just take it and go back and forth on that whetstone, that fucking blade is perfect for cutting.
I think you're the first person I've ever met who's referred to a cat's ass as a nice thing. I'm a little suspicious of you now.
Yeah, well, redneck,
Yeah, just a little bit.
Just a little bit. But yeah, that's sharpening knives is definitely an art. I don't know fuck all about sharpening, but I know a lot of people try to get me to do their blades for them because I take a little bit more time with it, and I got the stroke and everything, and I really like the stroke. But my friend, he used the edge of his car window to true his blade. And what the fuck is he doing? But it worked. It worked like a fucking hot damn. Or like a cat's ass.
Oh, we're running a little bit long here, so I figured I could just start showing pictures of things I've made. I've been making a bunch of preserves over the past, I don't know, 3 or 4 months. So I'll start throwing those up, and then you guys can give me shit for how bad they look, or you can ask me questions.
Sure. I don't think it looks
So
anything bad.
here's my setup typically for when I'm making sauerkraut. Here, so you can see in the sink I've got a crock. This is a 3-gallon crock. And then this was when I did 10 pounds. So I've got 5 pounds of cabbage on the board there. I've got 5 pounds of cabbage in the bin. And you can see my mandolin, I used to cut it. And then I've got a couple different amounts of a nice pure sea salt. And then all you do is you have to pour scalding water into your crock to sanitize it, and then you let it dry, and then you just wrap it up with plastic wrap to keep the bacteria and the air out. And then you get into shredding the cabbage and everything, and I'll pull a picture of that up. So this is a 5-pound batch of shredded cabbage that I just shredded with my mandolin, and you can see the bigger chunks there, the odds and ends I had to cut up with my knife. And then you just mix in, I think it's three tablespoons of sea salt per 5 pounds, and you just let that sit for about 10-15 minutes and let it wilt so it doesn't break when you pack it into the crock.
Mm.
So you can see here's the first 5-pound batch that's been packed into the crock, and I've got it sealed off with the plastic wrap.
Oh, that's plastic wrap. I was like, what is that? Yeah, okay, gotcha. Fuck, my hands are bad.
And then here's the kraut that's canned. So my first batch I ended up with, that's 4 liters right there. So basically you ferment it for just short of a month, so 4 weeks. And then you have to can it up. So I did a hot water bath, a hot water canner. So I had to bring my kraut up to almost at a boil, and then went into hot jars, and then was boiled off at a vigorous boil in a water canner for 10 minutes, and then left to sit for 5 before it came out. And I've got another picture here of the kraut coming out of the crock. I'll show you as well.
How long would a jar of that last on the shelf?
As long as the seal holds up. And honestly, man, because it's in a brine, it'll last for a long time as long as it's packed into the brine and it stays in the liquid there, or it's soaked up enough liquid. I mean, it'll last for years. You see those things last for a long time on shelves. So this was the kraut fresh out of the crock. I hadn't canned it yet, so it's less soft and it had a fresher flavor to it. Well, then here's
That's
some
German, right?
Yes,
German?
sauerkraut is German. It's a German word. But here's some pickled pumpkin I did. Now Dubs knows this stuff because I sent him a liter of it. But it's basically just pumpkin spice flavored pumpkin in kind of a sweet, sour solution. So there's a fair amount of sugar in this, along with some apple, just a nice unpasteurized apple cider vinegar. So that nice hippie vinegar you can get at organic stores and some of the supermarkets is what I use to pickle it with. And then you see here the jars, the finished product. Dubs got one of these, so he's a pretty happy guy.
Dubs is saying that we need to try it. If you haven't.
Yeah, I've got a couple liters. You guys could buy it off of me. But I'm not going to mail it to you because it costs me a lot of money. So unless you live near me, I'm not going to sell it to you.
Yeah, I think we'll be seeing each other off and on. So I'll give anything a whirl.
Here's
I don't like
something else.
pickled
Here's
tongue,
something else Dubs got to try. This is a port wine jelly. So I took a bottle of tawny port wine. It was actually a Costco brand. It was pretty good. Tawny port wine, so it's meant to be a dessert wine. And then I just cooked it off in some sugar and some lemon juice and some pectin. And the trick with jellies is to get the clarity, you have to strain your juice out overnight through a cloth. So I strained my freshly squeezed lemon juice through a cloth overnight, and you can see it's got beautiful clarity on it. And then the next picture is it all jarred up. Yeah, Dub's got
What
one of
would
these
you
guys.
make with that?
Port wine jelly?
Yeah.
It's kind of
What would you
boozy.
use that for?
It's
I
kind of
don't think I've
boozy,
ever
so
had
I
it.
would recommend it with. It would probably be really good on a charcuterie board if you had it with some sausage, some cheese, maybe a little bit of bread, some crackers. You could also have it with maybe a roast or something gamier, like if you're having bison or venison. I think it would be quite good. I think even duck it would be good with.
It's neat to see that they have duck there at that little store here.
Well, they
I don't know
probably
what
do.
duck
If they're
is out
sourcing their birds from the Hutterites, odds are they'll have duck and geese available.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I'd like to know where they're sourcing their duck and their rabbit from.
Here is, I think I mentioned it before in the chat. I made a crab apple liqueur. So I took, I think it was about 2 pounds of crab apples. And these are nice crab apples. They kind of taste like red wine. So I thought, well, I could probably do something with this. I took a bottle of vodka home from work. I didn't steal it, I promise. We rotate our stock over at the end of the year. And I took a bottle of vodka home, and I was like, well, I could make vanilla extract with this, or I could make something else. And eventually I decided, okay, I'm going to make a liqueur with these crab apples. So I just washed them, cut them in half, and then I just put them in jars with vodka for a month. And here's the finished product.
Do you put any cinnamon stick or anything like that in there?
I'm being a retard. Here's the finished product. So after a month, what I did was I strained it out, and then I put some simple syrup, a sugar syrup, in with the liqueur, and then it's sat for about a month. I actually just used it a couple of days ago to soak some apples in for apple chips, and it was quite nice. And no, I don't put any cinnamon sticks or anything like that in there. It was just apples and vodka, and then I threw a sugar syrup in there, so just like a pure apple flavor. It's really quite nice. I enjoyed it. I've had people try it, and they said it's really good.
Looks like it would be an excellent additive for flavor.
I think it would be good when making the filling for an apple pie or something. If you cooked with this, you could really concentrate your apple flavor. That's one of the use
Great way of
cases. That's
using
one of
the
the use
crab apples,
cases
too.
for liqueurs is you're taking concentrated flavor and you're adding it. And sometimes it's really difficult to get concentrated flavor out of an ingredient and to have that flavor persist when you cook it. So mint is a great example. When you cook mint, it turns gray, it wilts, it's gross. But you can buy creme de menthe, which is a mint liqueur, which has concentrated mint flavor, and you can use that in your cooking and really get a nice mint flavor. You can do the same thing with a lemon liqueur, like a limoncello. Because with lemon, you have to throw a bunch of lemon zest in there to get the lemon flavor. Because lemon flavor and lemon juice, the acidity from lemon juice, are two very different things. So a liqueur really is your best friend if you know how to use it. An orange liqueur like Grand Marnier is another great example.
Oh, I like that. Grand Marniers.
Yeah, Grand Marnier isn't cheap, but it's wonderful, wonderful stuff. It actually comes from a special kind of orange called a Seville orange. That's prized for its zest. It actually has really bitter juice. I've bought Seville oranges before, and their flavor is just incredible.
The oranges themselves, you say?
Yeah, so there
They have
are
great
some
flavor.
fruits out there whose juice is actually quite bitter, so you use it for the rind or the zest, which has a concentrated flavor. Like a kaffir lime is another example. I wanted to bring up the masala. So this is a masala for a biryani, which is an East Indian rice dish. That's quite nice. It's similar to maybe like a fried rice. It's different, but it's got that kind of art form to it. The biryani. So here's the masala I made for it. That's probably like 10 different spices all toasted and ground up. So you're gonna have things like nutmeg, mace, cinnamon, cloves, cumin seed, coriander seed. You're gonna have some hot chili powder in there, some salt, bay leaves, I think, and turmeric. And yeah, if you
just
could
crush the bay leaves right up, eh?
yes, yeah, and it all goes on a spice grinder, so it'll break up. And if you can really nail a masala, I mean, they're just wonderful. So much flavor.
I bet you that just has such a wonderful smell to it.
It does. I've been cooking my eggs in it a little bit, and yeah, I quite like it. Biryani, you actually have to make a marinade. So the masala goes in the marinade with typically chicken, and you marinate it it's a yogurt marinade for a couple days. And yeah, the flavor is just incredible.
Sorry, I am still here. I just was disengaged.
Oh, you didn't mute your mic this time.
No, I figured that out. I got that under control. I just have stuff going on here that I have no control over.
Oh, I guess we're not entertaining enough. Boomer's gonna have to talk about cats' asses again.
Oh no, what did I miss?
Yeah. Just give me a second, Ken. Yeah, people talking and stuff, so I was on mute. So you didn't have to hear somebody else's conversation.
Oh, Boomer, you've been bugging me about cookbooks. You want to know where to get good cookbooks and which cookbooks are good.
Yeah, shit. I wrote down one because you mentioned it there. I like to try things that are different. Most of my cookbooks are country home cooking, and most of the stuff I can do all myself. But one of the ones that I like to use is the Sneaky Chef. When you have kids or somebody who's really picky, because you can put shit into anything, and they would have no idea.
Okay, here's the thing. Here's the thing with cookbooks. About 95% of them are total fucking garbage. You can throw them out. They're a waste of your money. They're a waste of paper. And if you feel like you have to recycle them, fine, recycle them. But they're a total waste. You walk into a bookstore, I would say a minimum of 95% of those books are complete garbage. They're just meant to be trendy, to capitalize on trends. And they're almost always focused on one ingredient. Oh, this cookbook's about vanilla. Oh, this is a cookbook about modern Mongolian cuisine or some obscure cuisine you're just going to shake your head at. There really isn't
like those fucking
practical
magazines you see.
there. But wow, those photos are beautiful. It's such a pretty cookbook. Here's the trick with cookbooks. Stick to the public library. Take your books out of the library. Just flip through the books. I know that's harder to do these days with all the bullshit rules and a fake pandemic and everything, but stick to the library. Test drive your books. See if they're any good. And once you know they're good, you've tried some of the recipes out, yeah, this is pretty good. Then you buy them. If here in Canada, you can actually go to Chapters or Indigo, and they have a big sales section for cookbooks, like $20 and under or $10 and under. But the problem is, again, most of those books are hot, steaming piles of shit. So if you know which books are good, you tend to be able to find them like, oh, hey, I bought this really good pickling book for $10 because I knew it was good because I took it out from the library. If you do want to buy new books, do your research about the author. A lot of these authors will have videos up on YouTube or whatever. Study the author. So as a chef, I have chefs I respect a lot. And I will buy cookbooks from those chefs because I know they're the real deal. I'll still, I'll look at one cookbook from them, like, oh, hey, okay, this guy, he really writes recipes well, he specifies the quality of his ingredients, really goes into detail. Yeah, I'm definitely going to get his cookbook. And I've got one chef in particular. I've been cooking out of his cookbooks for years, and I have, I think...
Are you going to hold us in suspense, or are you going to tell us who it is?
Yeah, hold on. Wait a fucking minute. I've got... I think I've got 3 of his cookbooks. A couple cookbooks from his nephew, and then I've taken a couple of his cookbooks out from the library. So I've looked at probably 80% of his cookbooks, and I know he's the real deal. But this is a guy named Michel Roux. He's a British-French chef. So he was born in France, and he and his brother moved to Britain in young adulthood, and they pretty much invented the fine dining scene out in the United Kingdom. And I should mention, it's not Michel Roux Jr. Michel Roux Jr. is his nephew. It's Michel Roux Sr. I think he died last year. He really knows his shit. His cookbooks are incredible, but they're almost professional level. You pretty much have to be a chef to attempt this stuff, and you have to be able to source high quality ingredients. That's important. So I wouldn't recommend his cookbooks for the average cook. What I would recommend is just sort of the self-education process. Go to your local library. Just take cookbooks out that look good, the recipes look like they're interesting. Don't just go for the pretty photos and go from there. So I bought a couple of months ago the Mastering the Art of French Cooking by Julia Child. So the older folks in your Julia Child.
That Julia Child.
Yeah, her. Yeah, so you'll know about her.
Really?
Yeah, I got her cookbook, and hers are a little more approachable, but it's old school French cooking, so there's a lot of preparation.
She like the British Martha Stewart?
She was American.
Was she really?
This child, yeah, she's a big girl. She was an American girl who went and studied over in France to become a chef. So she actually trained to become a chef. She's not one of those phonies like fucking Jamie Oliver or all these assholes on the Food Network. If you're ever around me, don't put the Food Network on, or I'm going to throw a tomato at the television, or I'm going to yell at the television or something, because most of those people are phonies. Again, just go to the library, get a feel for what a good cookbook is, and just find some good recipes, and then just work your way through it. I can't recommend any sort of general cookbooks to use. Just find what suits you.
She's from Pasadena. She just looks British, so I always thought she was British.
No, she's American. And then if you're looking if you're looking into a particular cuisine, and if you want to be a little more adventurous, let's say you want to do some East Indian cooking or something, just take out a big pile of books from the library and study. So when I'm studying a cuisine, okay, what's the typical cooking fat they use? What do they use for salt? What's their seasoning? What do they use for sweetness? What do they use for acidity, for sourness? What do they use to add heat, to add spice to something? Do they use bitterness in their cuisine? What are sort of the staple ingredients? And then you work from there.
I know, their little tricks and their traits.
Yeah,
it's kind of crazy because it's just methods? Like any other trade.
Yeah, so if you're looking at like northern East Indian cuisine, they use a lot of cream and butter, very similar to France, versus the south of India, where a lot of them are vegetarians and vegans, so they're going to be cooking a lot more with oil. And then the spice profile changes. I honestly, I'd rather talk about French cooking because it's easier to describe. So the north of France, the heartland, it's a lot of red wine, it's a lot of butter and cream, just general richness, like the foie gras and all that fun stuff.
We already have a hard enough time getting good enough stuff to cook with that.
Beef, lots of organ meats. But then you go south towards the Mediterranean, it's a lot of olive oil, it's a lot of fish, and there's more of an
chicken
emphasis.
too, right?
Yeah, but there's more of an emphasis on just the freshness of ingredients because it's always warm down there. You know, you go down to Spain or near Spain in what's called the Basque Country, or I'm forgetting the French region, but it's called. But they have something called a piperade, which is kind of a vegetable sauce, I believe, with peppers and tomatoes, and then you get into stuff like a ratatouille, which is your vegetable stew, you know, zucchini, eggplant, peppers, tomato, and it's based off the freshness of the ingredients. And you tend to find the warmer climates, that's what it tends to be, is like the freshness of ingredients versus the northern climates where it's more about preserves.
And that's the shit that gives me fucking Harper. So I try to stay as fresh as I can, but living in the fucking subterranean fucking wilderness with all this snow, it's really hard to have fresh.
Yeah, we make do with what we've got. I mean, whatever.
Yeah. That's why I like to dry a lot of stuff out. It's not as good as fresh, but if you can dry it out, you can bring some of it back to life. And yeah, it really would be nice to have a proper setup where you could to cook this stuff or grow this stuff inside. Maybe like a decent. Like Casper, he has such a good setup. I would really love to see what he's doing there. And one of the videos I watched, they are growing tomatoes in January in the snow with aquaponics. So,
well, to be fair, we do have a lot of greenhouses here in Alberta, and we can pump out the tomatoes, the bell peppers, and the cucumber, and even some of the lettuce.
Yeah, and a lot of that stuff can grow for quite a long time.
But we don't really grow citrus out here, and I would love to have access to beautiful fresh citrus.
Yeah, even the places we do grow citrus, it's pretty rare of any fruits that will actually grow. Like Penticton, Kelowna. It's more like peaches and apples.
Yeah, and this is one of the reasons why it's such a shame that California is such a shithole, because they have the perfect Mediterranean climate for growing, which is why most of the produce we see in the supermarkets comes from California or from Mexico. Like, California is North America's produce basket, and it really is a shame. It's a third world shithole now.
Yeah, I think Florida is another one that does a lot of that kind of thing, but
yeah, Florida's a hotbed for citrus, but
yeah,
it doesn't have the more, let's say, temperate climate that California does. Florida's kind of volatile with the hurricanes and everything, and it's like a really hot, humid, sweltering heat. California's different. It's not as humid, and it really has that Mediterranean climate. So I mean, you have a lot of wine that comes out of California. They actually grow a lot of olives out there. They do their own olive oil. They have their citrus.
Grapes.
Well,
Lots
yeah,
of
grapes for wine, of course. And then you've got all of just pretty much all your produce. They pump out a ton of lettuce out there. You name it, they grow it out there in California.
Jealous. Yeah, and again, too bad fucking California is such a shithole. But people seem to be escaping it. Is there a cuisine that you prefer to cook? Is there anything that you really like to do yourself?
If I had total freedom to cook cuisine, I would probably do a lot of Thai cuisine. I really, really like the flavors of Thai cuisine. Just the sort of tropical flavors of Thai cuisine. And I find that most Thai dishes are pretty balanced. So they like to strike a balance between salt, or salty, sweet, sour, spicy.
Hot.
Yeah, so, Thai chili peppers have that nice, almost fruity flavor to them. And then you throw your fish sauce in there for your saltiness, your palm sugar, which gives you a nice kind of fruity sugar flavor, and then your lime juice, like a nice some kaffir lime zest as well in there to give it a nice citrus flavor, and then you throw the coconut milk in there for richness, and it's a nice Thai curry is really, really nice. It is so tasty.
Really, Thai curry? Would you have that? Does that got a bit more of a zing to it than just the straight up like
whereas
curry chicken?
Your typical East Indian curry comes from a masala or a dry powder. The Thai curries tend to come from a curry paste, a wet paste. So that involves actually crushing up chili peppers and various spices, and then
bringing us back to our mortar and pestle.
Like there's a lot of garlic in there, a lot of ginger, shallots. It's packed with flavor. Some curry pastes have up to 20 ingredients. They are packed full of flavor, and I will always make them in my mortar and pestle because it's nowhere near the same if you just buy a plastic container of it in the supermarket. And then you sort of fry that up in. Well, what you do is you take the coconut milk and you actually reduce it down until the fat separates from the liquid, and then you cook the curry paste in the coconut fat. You fry it up in there, and then you throw your meat in there, and you cook that off, and then you throw some more coconut milk in there to finish. And man, it's good stuff. Oh, I just want to add,
So fantastic.
Don't buy your coconut milk from the supermarket. Go to a proper Asian market to get your coconut milk, because most of the stuff you find in the supermarkets is basic bitch shit. It's got all sorts of additives and crap. Coconut milk is it's pretty much just coconut and water.
Really? I don't think I've ever cooked with coconut milk.
If you get the proper full-fat coconut milk that's closer to a coconut cream, oh man, the flavor is so nice.
I don't even think I've actually had coconut milk. Definitely like to try it though. How about you, Juicy? Is there anything that you like to cook? Are you still there? Is there anything cuisines that you like personally? Oh, maybe not.
Juicy is always here lurking in the background. I just like to imagine that, like her avatar, she's just kind of sitting there on the couch.
Yeah, it's been one of those days for some people, and it's been kind of nice watching people work really hard, not doing a lot. Some people just have to sit back and enjoy some time.
Yeah, Dubs is
Juicy
right
doesn't
there in the
get that
chat.
very
When
often.
you're working with coconut milk, you got to shake the shit out of it to sort of emulsify it.
Is it separate and just sits in the bottom?
Yeah, because it tends to sit in the can for a while. You can actually, when it comes to coconut milk, now that I remember, you can buy coconut milk in a Tetra Pak that's been pasteurized. It's called UHT, or ultra high temperature pasteurization. That tends to keep the fresh flavor better. So if you get a carton of coconut milk, that tends to be the best, of course, versus the fresh stuff, which we can't really get out here.
Not unless you actually go buy the coconuts.
Yeah, and the coconuts you tend to get here are pretty old. And then, yeah, breaking down coconuts a different story. It's a big mess. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, I don't like the coconut mess myself. A lot of people I know like to eat the raw coconut, and I think that's
it's quite
I've
nice.
never really been into that.
The coconut flesh is really nice.
If I think the freshness may be a big differ, but I don't think I've ever had fresh coconut, because it's like you have coconut on different desserts and stuff, and it's like, I like coconut. And then I've had
let me
coconut
tell
out
you,
of
man,
a
shredded
coconut.
shredded coconut and the flesh that comes out of a coconut are two very different things. Shredded coconut sucks. It has next to no flavor because most of the fats come out of it. Fresh coconut, you've got the fat in there, and it's tasty, man.
How would you know if you're getting a fresh one or not?
Well, I'm saying fresh as in you actually break open the coconut yourself and then you fish out the flesh and eat it. It's not fresh compared to what you're going to get in Asia, but it's still taken from coconut.
Say I went to
the
say I went to the Asian market. Is there a way of testing which ones are fresher than the other ones?
I'm a little rusty on this, but I believe what is it? You have to shake it, and you want to hear the coconut water sort of sloshing around, I believe is the test you do for it. I could very well be wrong on that.
That makes sense, though, because if it's not fresh, it would sound different.
Yeah, it would kind of dry out, and you'd lose a lot of the water inside.
Well, and that's what I mean. Like, I think that I would like it, but I've had coconut raw, and I'm just like, it's not what I expect. So maybe that's just the thing. I don't know. But I would like to definitely cook more with coconut in the future if I could figure it out. My dad really liked coconut.
Well, guys, do you have any final questions, final thoughts? You want to bug me some more about something?
No, not overly. I think we covered a lot of different issues. I'm surprised that it went so fast.
I think Juicy
I
fell
learned a
asleep.
lot today. Or she forgot where her mute button is again.
Okay, well, we're gonna hang this one up, and we'll be back with another episode. Maybe another day, maybe not, but otherwise we're gonna stick to Saturdays at 5 o'clock Eastern Time. We think it's kind of a nice happy medium there because you got Slippy coming on in about an hour. So that's what we're going to do going forward. So thanks, guys, for coming out, and we'll see you in the future.
Yeah, thank you, and we'll see you all later.